I did just a weekly planner, and I took those daily events that I had put together for my Twitter feed, and I put them into this daily planner. This is the first year I've done it, and we'll see how it lands. But it's one of those things where having that, obviously we all need planners, particularly for those of us who are now working from home, and so having a weekly planner that you can just open up and see what's happening in my week, as well as what happened in the revolution this week. I thought that was worth pursuing. So we'll see. I've sold a few copies so far. Unfortunately, Amazon had some production holdups, which meant that I wasn't able to get it available until quite late in the season. But it's good all year, so.
Well, cool. What other things have you done, or are you thinking of doing to diversify your personal brand, if you will?
So my books are available, obviously in ebook and paperback. Most of them are also available in audio, and they will all be eventually available on Audible and iTunes. Some of them are also available through local library or through a wide variety of other vendors. The first few, I wound up locked into a contract with Audible where it's only available on Audible and iTunes. I have a magnificent narrator who I've been working with. I actually have two narrators because The Break, which is my Nova Scotia book, is told from the point of view of a young woman. And my narrator has a very wonderful, rich, deep baritone. And I wasn't going to ask him to do a whole book where he had to do a falsetto.
That's fair.
So I have, yeah. The Break is the one that's set in Nova Scotia, and it's actually about an American refugee from Massachusetts who has to go up to Nova Scotia to escape. Her father and she are loyalists. They have to escape the Americans and try to rebuild their lives up there. And so I have a really wonderful gal who's done the recording, the production of that book in audio. I am working on other projects, with this material. At this point, I don't have any television or movie adaptations in the works.
Okay.
But I, on the one hand, I would love for my stuff to reach a wider audience through those media. On the other hand, I definitely recognize that they are very different media from what I'm doing. And so trying to adapt one of my books to some sort of movie or a television show would probably break my heart.
Well, that's understandable.
On the other hand, making this material available to a wider audience through those media is something that I would definitely be interested in if the opportunity arose at some point in the future. So if there's a producer watching this who is interested in talking about that, let's talk and have your people contact my people, and we'll see what we can do. But at this point, as I mentioned in my biography, I am one of the most prolific novelists of the American Revolution, which both thrills me and really makes me angry. There should be a lot more competition. There should be, the reason that I write about the American Revolution is that it is a pivotal moment in human history. It is the first time when a government was formed not just to decide which prince was going to rule over a patch of dirt, but it was a revolution that was undertaken to challenge the very concept of how governments and the governed interacted, what their relationship was, and who owed what to whom. And the Civil War gets tons and tons of ink and press and movies and so forth. And to me, it's not as interesting, it's not as important in human history. Obviously, it's important in American history. I absolutely get that. But in terms of a pivot point in human history, the American Revolution is unique in that regard. So I would love for there to be thousands more novels written about the American Revolution. It is absurd to me that with just 12 books out, I am closing in on being the author with the most books written about the American Revolution. A lot of people write about the Revolution, but they only write 1 or 2 books and then they move on. Whereas, again, there are so many incredible stories to tell that I think even once I've finished with the original project of writing one for each of the colonies and future states, it's going to be very hard for me to turn away from the Revolution and try to find some other thing to write about. I've had some people who've asked me to revisit America and revisit the characters and their descendants, in later parts of history. The War of 1812 is an interesting period, but it's not as important as the Revolution. It was kind of the last gasp of the American War of Independence in many ways. I've been fascinated with the Silk Road and how that came to be and how it operated over its history. I've pondered whether I should visit that next. As a person of largely Scandinavian heritage, I've also been very fascinated with the period before the Vikings. The Vikings have gotten a lot of press, and believe me, I love a good Viking story. But there was a lot of really fascinating history that happened in Scandinavia long before the Vikings. So that's another era that holds some interest for me. But I don't know. We'll see. And maybe I'm going to come back and do a second story in each of the colonies. Who knows? I don't know. There's no lack of material to draw from there. And I would like to see many more authors take on the Revolution. And I do my best to get the word out about any book that I find about the Revolution that I think is well written. I love to get people fired up about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, your perspective there. I like how you are trying to stay away, so to speak, from the major historical figures and tell the stories of real people, of the average person, because I feel like that's in some ways more impactful. So often we see, whether it's in print or film, we see these stories of these heroes, and it's all glory and greatness and power and success, and that was probably a very small percentage of what really happened. Most people, that was not their experience. And I feel like it's absolutely worthwhile to hear what the average person experienced. I think of, and my brain works in weird ways sometimes, so you might wonder what the heck I'm thinking and how I'm making this connection. But I think of the song. Oh gosh, I'm getting my names mixed up. Cranberries was a band that I think of that did it. Zombie, I think it is, which is a very anti-war song. But to me, it really does a great job of kind of hitting the point of how war is tragic and affects the lives of people, and kind of takes that shine off of it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I actually, until the last few books, I've actually avoided depicting battle, primarily because I've read Homer and I can't outdo him. You know, but in the last few books, I have had some scenes that take place on battlefields, and I find those very difficult to write, in part because I haven't had the experience myself. So I don't have any personal experience to draw on. I'm having to read Homer and read other accounts of war to develop an understanding of what my characters are going through. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I do cover, though, that I think I do a pretty good job of, is showing how those battles that take place in very sort of small constrained spaces have impacts that spread far, far beyond the boundary of the battlefield. And I think that's something that a lot of war writing overlooks. And so I think that's really important to understand. The other reason that I write about ordinary people is because I really want, and this is sort of the deep reason for my writing, is I want people to understand that you do not have to make it into the pages of the history books in order to shape history. And that applied to our ancestors, and it applies to us. And I think that's something that is really critical to just internalize, make that part of how you approach your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask this question kind of towards the end, but I think it fits now with you saying that. What legacy do you want to leave? What impact do you want to make? Whether it's something that's grand or small, whether your name as an author is remembered for eons to come. What impact do you want to make? What legacy do you want to leave?
Well, where I am right now, I've given a certain amount of thought to this. My father was a financial planner, and he dealt with life insurance all the time. So he was always encouraging us to think in terms of what happens if the worst happens. What do you leave behind if the worst happens today? And where I am right now, my legacy is that hopefully I've left some tools behind for people to engage in a deeper understanding of the origins of this really exceptional country that we live in, and to understand how those origins were not the simple matter that we sometimes get presented of great heroes on horseback striding about and making grand pronouncements, but they were the small everyday acts of decent people doing the right thing, doing the best they could with the information that they had, and making the best decisions that they could. And that some of those decisions were made with their legacy in mind, with their own, with us in mind. And hopefully convincing people that we need to do the same, that it is our responsibility to make our decisions with our own descendants in mind.
And what do you think the legacy I'm not sure how to ask this. How do you define the legacy that was left to us by those who fought and participated in the American Revolution? Because I feel like one thing I'm really getting from you is that, yes, the revolution, there was the Revolutionary War, but you're reminding me that there's so much more to the revolution than just the fighting, just the battles. There was,
Right.
the political aspects of developing the Declaration of Independence. There was obviously going to be changing the hearts and minds of the people as they transitioned from being British loyalists to embracing becoming citizens of the new America. So what legacy do we have that they've left to us?
Some of that legacy is in our sense of personal liberty and personal responsibility that you know, plays out in some of our politics today. And you know, some of it is just in the, I think, you know, I've traveled around the world a little bit, nowhere near as much as I want to, and of course in these days, nowhere near as much as I hope to in the future. But the thing that I've found that really typifies America and differentiates us today from other places, and I think this is a legacy of that era, is the sense that there isn't any problem that we can't overcome. There isn't any challenge that we can't find a way to address. And you know, those solutions are not always pretty, they're not always ideal, but we find our way to them. And sometimes we try absolutely every other possibility first, and that's human nature. But we keep trying. And that's something that I think is, I'm not going to say it's uniquely American, because obviously lots and lots of other people in other countries share that perspective and share that approach. But I think where we really shine is in our determination that that we can't give up, that we do have to find a way to continue and soldier on even when things get really tough. And you know, obviously we share that with a lot of other people around the world. That I'm not going to claim that aspect of human nature is unique in America. But I think what is unique in America is the idea that one person doing the right thing can change the world. And you know, that a lot of other places, the focus is much more on group effort and you know, coming together and so forth. Whereas here in America, for good or for bad, and sometimes it doesn't work very well. You know, we have this idea that it's acceptable and even noble to undertake a major thing by yourself, and you know, to be that sort of that lone person who sees a way forward. Whereas I think in most other parts of the world, that's rarer, and here it's quite common. And I think that's a real strength, and I think that does come directly out of the revolution.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that is something I think that's largely unique to American society and culture. I've actually been talking about that kind of thing with my sister recently, prompted in part by what's been going on with the coronavirus. And I'm not trying to get into a discussion about the coronavirus. That's not something I'd like to get into right now.
Yeah.
But you know, just the differences in culture, whereas with so many of the Eastern cultures, it's very much the focus is on the society and what's good for the need, or I mean, almost quoting Star Trek, you know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And American society is very different. But one of the things that I've said is that it's hard to find that balance where we're asserting our rights, but we're also remembering our responsibilities and trying to remember that while we have the right to do something, it may not be in our best interest or the best interest of our family or our culture to do those things. And so just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should.
Right. Well, I think that's as I said, for good or for ill, we have this sense of individuality in this country,
Mhm.
which I think is a really wonderful thing when we remember that individual action involves both freedom and responsibility. And that's something that I think sometimes gets, those two get divided, and they can't be. They are like two sides of a coin. They are indivisible from one another.
I agree with that 100%.
So, I believe strongly that the foundation of our country was based on, this idea of individual action and having that inextricably bound individual freedom and responsibility. So,
I feel like this would be a good stopping place, but I'm going to be selfish and keep you for a few more minutes if you don't mind.
Sure.
As someone who is a writer and is working on growing my business and my brand, and I'm just curious about things. How did you, I know you've made some appearances on shows on American Heroes channel. I thought I've seen you on programs on the History Channel as well, but I could be wrong on that. But how did you get
well,
into
the History Channel is another Discovery Network channel, so they may have cross-pollinated.
Okay. How did you get into that? Was that something where someone approached you and said, "Hey, we like your books"?
I literally got an email out of the blue from a producer at Discovery Networks saying, we're putting together this program, and it looks like it's very much the same sort of thing that you're writing about. And it was specifically about people who were not remembered in American Revolution history. And I said, well, yeah, which kidney do you want? And so that was a really neat experience. I literally flew down to Hollywood and went into a gritty little sound stage with a green screen behind me, and talked about the revolution. And I did a lot of studying to prepare for the questions that they had for me, and it came out pretty well. As I mentioned in the bio, the show was actually nominated for an Emmy. It wasn't nominated for my work. It was nominated, I think, for sound work or something. But still, Emmy nominated.
Sure.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It was a high quality show, and it was a show that, although the history that was presented in it was probably not perfect, it was certainly it was engaging, and it got at some of those deeper truths about the American Revolution, about the role of ordinary people in the revolution, and about the roles of some of the people whose because of their gender, because of their ethnicity, they get forgotten. And so that I thought was valuable and interesting. The thing that I think is really important to remember about the revolution was, although the majority of the people living in America and the majority of the people who fought were certainly, ethnically European, Northern European, the revolution is not the exclusive property of people of that heritage. There were people who took part in the revolution who came from all kinds of different backgrounds. And so when I hear, somebody who is, from Latin America talking about, oh, well, that's your revolution. No, my friend, it's your revolution too. The Spanish saved it. When I hear an African American saying, well, that's not really relevant to me because my people didn't have any part in it. Oh no, yes, they did. Let me tell you a story. And so that's part of why I try to tell those stories, is because I want to make sure that everybody understands that they do have ownership of this legacy, and that legacy is one that is important and worth defending.
So it sounds like you're, as part of that, you're, as you're trying to bring people into that legacy and say, no, this is yours too. This is something that you can take some ownership and pride in. And
Mhm.
it feels like you're very much trying to unify people and bring them together.
Absolutely. There's an unfortunate tendency in some people to say, well, the American Revolution proves that my political party is right or whatever. A couple of things about that. Number one, 18th century politics are completely irrelevant to modern politics and vice versa. So, to try to claim that some party has the exclusive legacy of the American Revolution, I think is absurd. And at the same time, I think it's really important to understand that no matter what your ethnic history is, no matter what your ancestry is, the fact that we are all here in this country together means that we do all have a part to play in maintaining that legacy, and not just sort of taking that legacy as handed down from on high, but as an active thing that we need to engage with daily, and really understand and really apply to, apply those 18th century politics to our modern understanding of the world. They're not relevant in terms of the actual political struggles that were taking place, but the underlying causes, the underlying thought processes, the underlying philosophies are completely relevant today, and those are worth understanding and worth pursuing.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that 100%. I feel like I have talked very little, and you've just been
I've been monopolizing the conversation.
No. You have been sharing your wisdom with very little prompting from me, is what I was saying.
Such as it is.
I am very impressed with your knowledge and understanding. One of the questions I had here that I was going to ask you is how, as a quote amateur historian unquote, how you gained respect and the clout or whatever terminology you want to use, to where you were able to have opportunities to appear on a television show. You've been writing so many books, and I think in a way you've answered it with you've done your research, you've put in the work, and I feel like kind of the lesson there is that we don't have to have the certificate, we don't have to have letters after our name. If you're passionate about something, if something is important to you, you put in the work, you educate yourself, you research, you study, you learn and you grow, and you can do it.
Yeah, I'll share a secret with you. I don't have even so much as a 2-year degree. I am a high school graduate, and that's it in terms of formal education. I have undertaken to educate myself about a great many things because, as I said earlier, I'm curious about everything. But I've particularly undertaken to educate myself about the American Revolution because it lit me on fire as I started reading about it, as I started learning about it. And whatever your passion is, let it light you on fire. Let it grab you, and spend your time learning about it, really engaging in it. And it doesn't mean just listening to things that you already agree with. It means also reading the things that you disagree with vehemently, to develop an understanding of why you believe what you believe, as well as being open to the possibility that maybe you were wrong about some parts of it, and that's okay. That's what growth and learning is all about, is realizing I was wrong, and I need to change. And when it comes to developing enough of an education to be respected, if you will, as a an historian of the American Revolution, as you said, what it really comes down to is just doing the work. And so that means, again, being curious. And when I come across something that I don't understand, going out and developing an understanding of it, and maybe even developing 2 or 3 understandings of it, because the first one might be wrong. So, I try to tell the story of the American Revolution, not just from the American side. I've written 2 books that are stories told from the Loyalist side, and I just finished one that was written from the point of view of a British soldier. I've written one from the point of view of a French soldier who took part on the American side. And in each of those, the person telling the story is a good person. They're doing their best, even if they are doing things that personally I disagree with. They're doing their best in the circumstances that they have. And I think it's important to acknowledge that even people with whom we disagree vehemently, they're doing their best based on the information that they have and their understanding of the world. And if we think that their understanding of the world is incorrect, well, then that's our work to try to improve that understanding, not just to yell at them and tell them that they're wrong and bad. Because the one thing that we all have in common is we look in the mirror and we see a good person. At least we want to. And if we start from the assumption that the person we're dealing with is not a good person, we immediately have a disconnect with how they see themselves, and it's really impossible to bridge that gap. So we have to start from the presumption that the person we're talking to is a good person, even if we don't agree with the things that they're doing, so that we can try to find some common ground that we can then work.
Very wise words. Very wise words. One of the things that bothers me so much in what I see in society in general, but especially on social media, is dehumanizing of others, and the assumption that people just devaluing people as people, saying that they're stupid, or they're not, their life isn't worth as much because you disagree with them, or whatever. I mean, there's so much of that, and I could give lots of examples and go on for a while, but I think where you're coming from is the right perspective to have. If we want to see positive change, if we want to have a society where things are positive, where we're working together, we're coming together and solving problems, we have to come at it from a perspective that we value other people, and that it's okay to disagree. It's okay to try to peacefully solve problems. It's not okay, and it's not going to work if we don't value each other.
And I don't always live up to that myself, and I admit that freely.
Nobody's perfect.
I do my best. I do my best, and when I do fall short, I spend a fair amount of time being angry at myself.
Lars, you're a good man, a wise man, and I have appreciated our time together so much. I'm going to feel guilty if I take.
I've really enjoyed it too. Well, thank you very much for letting me just blather on and on. I feel like I tend to take a thread of thought and just chase it for miles. So I appreciate your patience with me.
It's all been worth listening to, and it's all been educational. So before we go, again, if you'd share where people can find you and how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to do so.
So the best place to find me is, again, on my website, Lars DH Hedbor, and that's HEDBOR.com. And you can also find me on Twitter at Lars DH Hedbor and on Facebook.com/Lars DH Hedbor.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Lars. I appreciate it. Happy holidays. It's we're like a week out from Christmas right now. I don't know when this will be up, but especially if we're breaking it up into pieces, like I probably will, because we've talked a good long time. So
yeah,
I appreciate you very much.
And I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun. And you know, as I said at the beginning, our favorite subject is always ourselves, and so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about myself a little bit.
Oh, thank you. So, all right. Well, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Merry Christmas. Okay, take care.
You too.